Okay, so in the last video, we wrote a script to upload our code to the server and then to just clean it up and delete all of the Python bytecode or compiled Python, and to run DOS to Unix to get rid of those Windows new lines, which are the curse of Django developers everywhere. So there's one more thing I wanted to show you in the script before we move on to the next script, where we're going to actually set up our new code on the server and start running it. And that is just to do with this little set E setting. So as you might remember, we set this so that if our script crashes halfway through, then it'll stop rather than continuing to run. And this is a good thing to do for two reasons. One, you might have a command in your script which you don't want to run unless everything up to that point has succeeded, which this enforces. And the second thing is that you might have an error in a long script, and if your script doesn't crash, you might miss it amongst all of the other output. So this is why this is a good idea. And so one thing to note is this here string, this sort of string that gets piped into Bash on the remote server, this will not inherit this setting. This setting only applies to this Bash script, and this is actually a separate little mini Bash script, which we're just defining inside of our Bash script. It's a bit of a Bash script inception. So we need to also set E here. And it's also important to note that this script doesn't inherit any of the environment variables or anything like that. So for example, if we wanted to set an environment variable called server in this script as well, we would need to write server equals server like that to get this to pop into here. And then when the script runs, it would define server as cheat server. Right, so just a little reminder to put set E inside of your here strings as well as at the top of your scripts. We don't need to put a hash bang at the top of this because we're already telling it to run with Bash. Cool, so let's start with our next script. We've uploaded the code. Now let's set it all up in our app directory and restart Gunicorn with the new code. I'm going to call this install code. It's a bash file ending in sh, and we need to remember to set the executable permission on it so it can run chmod +x. Cool, that's done. We need to add the hash bang to tell Linux or Bash or whatever to run it using the bash program. We want to add a comment saying like install Django app on server. And we want to set E so that when it fails properly rather than just like running in some sort of weird zombie mode. And I'll copy some of this stuff over just for convenience. So we also want it to run with the server as cheat server. And instead of copying Django project files to server, it's going to be installing Django project files on server, or Django project on server. And we'll put a finished command at the end. Let's say finished. Install. Cool. Now let's go over all the things we need to do in order to install our code once it's been uploaded and cleaned and all that. And that is we want to stop Gunicorn, and then at the end we want to start Gunicorn. Now, this certainly isn't the only way to do a deployment. This is kind of, I guess, the most crude way to go about it, where we're just stopping our server, changing everything, and starting it back up again. And this has the advantage of just being really, really simple. Like, there are very few moving parts. In fact, for some period of time, there'll be no moving parts because everything is just stopped. The problem with it is in this period of time, our website will be down. It won't be serving requests. If anyone tries to access your website, they'll just get the fail screen of like, could not connect or whatever. You can help with that by setting up a service like Cloudflare or something else to basically present a web page being like under maintenance, or we're currently doing a deployment, please come back later, which makes your website look a little less shitty and broken, but users still won't be able to actually do anything with it. So that's something to think about. The thing is, though, this script will take like, I don't know, 3 to 20 seconds to run. So in the happy case, if this all just works, no one's going to notice, basically. Maybe someone will get like a an error for a second and I'll try again and it'll be deployed. I think the way we're doing this though, we're actually stopping Gunicorn in such a way that it's probably just going to like drop any current requests, which once again, I'm fine with. You can do some extra fancy stuff to make sure that Gunicorn gracefully finishes all requests before stopping, but we're just going to shoot it in the head and yeah, fuck those people, I guess. Once again, not a great user experience. We can do some more work to make it better, but for now, we're just going to stick with that to keep it simple. Cool. And the other problem, of course, is what happens if we stop Gunicorn, do our deployment, and then something in the middle fails? Let's say our database migration goes wrong and our database is in a fucked up state and we need to log in and fix it and restore it back up and maybe do some other stuff to fix the problem. It could take hours, days even, to fix a problem with the deployment, and we might have our app in a broken state where we can't start Gunicorn again. And this is something to consider again. Is that a risk you want to take? Is your app so important that it should always be running? And if that's the case, then after doing this guide, I would suggest you go and look at blue-green deployments as one way to avoid this kind of issue. But for now, we're just going to stop Gunicorn, make our changes, and start it again because it's easy. Right, so in between these two things, we need to delete our old files. Old files. We need to copy new files to the app folder. We need to install our Python packages. And we need to run our Django migrations. Then we need to collect our new static files. And I think that's it. Yep. Oh, and we need to reread. And then we start Gunicorn. Cool. So we want to delete all of the old files because we just don't want any old crap lying around. I've worked with some people who are just like kind of scared to delete stuff on the server because they always want it to keep running. But if you don't delete old things on the server, then your server just gets full of shit and then you have no idea what's going on, and it's way worse than breaking at one time because now your server is in a state where you can no longer understand it. So it's really important to clean up after yourself when you're deploying. We're going to copy the new files across. These are the files that we uploaded using upload code, and this will be the new code that runs our app. We're going to install our Python packages from requirements text so that we can have the new Python packages that we need. And this will just automatically run. If you, add something new to your requirements text locally, do some local development, it works, and then you deploy that, this code will install it in the virtual environment on the server for you without you needing to do anything, which is pretty cool. It's going to run your Django migrations. So if you add a new model, you make the migrations, you have the migration script in your source code, and then you run it on your local server. This will copy the code up onto the server, and here it will run those migrations and apply it to your database, which is important because if you don't do that, you'll have all of these errors where Django tries to do stuff with models that aren't in the database, and you'll get failures. We're going to collect our static files again. So when we delete the old files, we'll also be deleting our static files, and this will just go through and recollect them into one place so that white noise can serve them. And I think that's fine. And it's necessary to collect them every time because if we add new static files like a logo or we change our CSS, we want to run collect again to get those changes into the static files folder. We're going to reread a supervisor config. That's so if we make changes to the config, they get applied rather than just getting deployed and not being looked at. We need to tell supervisor D, hey, look at this config. This is what you should use now. So we'll put in a command for that. And then when that's all done, hopefully our app will be working and we can start Gunicorn again. Cool. Those are all the steps. I'm actually going to convert these all into the sort of active tense. We're going to be stopping Gunicorn. We're going to be deleting old files. We'll be copying new files, installing, running, and then I'll turn these all into actual log statements. Rereading, starting Gunicorn. Cool. I'll show you a trick. So if you're in an editor like Visual Studio Code, which this is, or Sublime Text, which is great as well, or Visual Studio, or perhaps PyCharm, not sure, probably PyCharm. You can do this multi-cursor thing where you select a string like this pound, and you can press Control D, and it selects all similar. So I'm just, once again, select Control D, 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 D. I'm just holding down Control D, D, D. And now we can edit all of these at the same time. So I'm going to replace this with echo, E, string, new line, tab, 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 space. And now you might be wondering, how are we going to get to the end of this and close the quote? And it seems kind of impossible because these are all different length strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to start, bottom, back, close it. Sweet. And so now this is documenting what we're doing in real time. All of this code will be running on the server, so we can't just execute it like this. We need to tell it to put it onto the server and run it there. So we're going to do that by using SSH root at $server. And we're going to tell SSH to run bin bash on the server, run the bash shell. And we're going to take this text here and all the commands in there. I'm going to pipe them in there using a here string. And this is the same technique we used last time in upload code, where we just define a sort of mini bash script inside of our bash script and tell it to transfer that to the server and run it in bash on the server. So that's the same thing here. We just didn't indent it. So in the other one we had it indented. This doesn't matter, you can do this or this. I'm just going to keep it like this because it's basically the only script in this file, and it's a tiny bit easier to read like this. Cool. And the one other thing, we want to whack set E in here, just so if it fails here, for example, it doesn't keep running. So that's the purpose of set E. Let's get started. So we're going to start by stopping Gunicorn. We're going to need to go into the app directory on the server. We're going to need to activate our virtual environment. And then we want to run that sort of convenience script to run supervisor.ctl to stop Gunicorn. Scripts severe.should stop Gunicorn. So if you forgot, this is just a convenience wrapper I wrote around supervisor control to just allow us to write it a bit more conveniently. You might disagree that this is more convenient and prefer to do it the other way. That's fine as well. And we're just telling it to stop Gunicorn. And this is now testable. We can try this script out. So it's kind of nice that we've already run our code upload. So all of our code is on the server in the deploy directory. And this doesn't require anything to be on the server. We're just running this from our local machine and sending the commands to bash. So we can run this independently. That's what I'm trying to say. So we can give this a test. So let's just check that Gunicorn's running. Count is 74. The count is 75. The count is 76. Very satisfying. Let's give it a crack. We run install code. Oh, we run chmod x on install code. That's good, but we want to run the script itself. Swing Django project on server. Stopping Gunicorn stopped, and then it just printed all this other crap because it's not actually doing anything. So this got run. You can see that it said Gunicorn stopped. And because we don't believe anything as programmers, we want to just check, like, did that stop Gunicorn in fact? And it looks like I did take my site down, which is cool. That's what we wanted to do. Nice, Gunicorn stopped. Let's keep going. Let's try, may as well, at the end, to start Gunicorn again. Start Gunicorn. So we're going to stop Gunicorn, and then we're going to start Gunicorn. Let's see if that works. Stopping Django project on server. Stopping Gunicorn, error, not running. And then it started it. Yeah. A little bit interesting that this didn't stop the script when we had the E parameter set, or the E setting set, or whatever you want to call it. But whatever, I'm happy with that. Let's check that Gunicorn actually started. Cool, the count is 77 now. Now it's 78. Very nice. So let's do the next bit where we delete the old files and copy the new files. So you might recall that we uploaded some files, config, scripts, our actual Django code, and requirements text. So we're going to remove recursively, force it, app, tut. I'm going to add some other things to this list as well. We're going to remove recursively, force, app, config, app, scripts, and requirements.txt, and copy some new files. So I just use multi-cursor to make this a bit easier, but we're going to copy from root deploy tut to app, and the same with config, the same with scripts. This is our deploy folder where we've been storing files that we're uploading, and we don't want to rm, we want to copy recursively. Same with requirements.text. We're going to copy requirements.text from root deploy. I'm just using absolute paths here, just so I don't care where the script runs from, to app. Let's give that a go. So if this, you might notice that this this script sort of assumes that the super thing is going to be here, which internally also assumes that the config will be there. So if I screw this up, I'm going to have to like go into the server and fix up what I screwed up. So I really hope that this works. In addition, I guess while we're on this subject, there are quite a few assumptions baked into this script that you might not notice straight away. And that's things like it assumes that an app folder exists, that there's already a virtual environment, that this script is here, that supervisor D is running, that internally the script assumes that supervisor CTL is present in the virtual environment and there is a config file present. It assumes that the code has already been deployed to rdeploy. So there's actually a lot of assumptions in this script that you should be thinking about when you're writing it. And it's okay to make assumptions. You just need to be aware of them so that when something goes wrong, you like try and think what assumption in this script has been violated so that you can debug it quickly rather than, I don't know, just flailing about randomly. So we've, in our script now, deleted the old files, added the new files, and we'll just keep rolling along. So let's run the script. Stopping Gunicorn. We stopped it, copied the new files, started it again. All good. We shouldn't expect anything to change because I think the old files were the same as the new files. Or were they? Okay, so you can see that our static files are now broken. So we don't have any CSS, and our website looks like shit rather than the beautiful work of art it was before. So what's going on here? How will we try and debug this one? So we can press Control-Shift-I to open up the inspection thing in Chrome, where you can just right-click in whatever browser you're on, go inspect. Unless you're in Safari, then they make you do this magic dance to get this thing to open up. Haha, joke's on you. Okay, and let's look at the network tab. We can see there's some errors. Let's reload this, and you can see we are getting the HTML document nicely. And it tries to load the style sheet, and just like didn't work. Failed to load response data. Okay. Interestingly, our Gunicorn server is kind of telling the world that it's a Gunicorn server. I wonder if we can turn it off. It's actually a security leak. You don't want to tell people what you're running because then they're like, oh, let me just Google for Gunicorn vulnerabilities. Oh, it's 20.4? Gunicorn vulnerabilities 20.4. What do we got here? So yeah, you do not want to let people know that you're running Gunicorn. If you can avoid it, you don't want them to know you're running Django. You just want to hide everything if you can. Of course, the CSRF token that gets passed in the cookies is a dead giveaway, so that's harder to hide. But yeah, there's static files. What the fuck? There's some other things we can do to debug this issue. If we pop up our this thing, we can tail. Let's say let's look at the last 12 log lines from logs. I'm on my computer, I'm not in the server. So take root and tutor. Let's tail the last 12 app logs Gunicorn to access. We can see we've had some requests coming in for styles.css, and our server has said we cannot find these styles. So we've confirmed that our server has received the request, tried to process it, and been like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. These files don't exist. Now, there is a reason why this isn't working. If we look at the root of where our files come from, which is an app tut, you will recall that when we run collect static, it takes all of our static files from our Django app, puts them all into this folder called static files, which we defined using our static root setting in section, in settings. Oh, fuck. Sorry. Yeah, we defined a static root setting in our settings file in our Django app, and that path is a folder called static files, and that folder is populated when we run collect static. And if we go and look in that folder to see if our static styles.css file is there, you will find that this folder is in fact not there because we deleted it. So that's why our static files are broken, because we deleted all of our static files, which is a very satisfying answer, I think. You would expect them not to work when you deleted them all. If they still worked when you deleted them all, that would be more confusing. So what do we do? Well, we can, I guess, skip ahead a little bit and collect static. So we're in the app directory because we CD'd there. We've already activated our virtual environment. I guess in order to run this, we need to be in the tut directory, which is where manage pi is. So I think up here, I'm just going to cd into tut and collect static. Let's rerun our script. Cool. We'll reread our static files, and then could not restart Gunicorn because we're in the tut directory. See, we cd'd into tut, and now we're still in tut. We tried to run scripts, but scripts isn't in tut, it's in app, and so it failed. And that sort of is one of the downsides of using cd all of the time in scripts, is you sort of jump all over the place and lose track of where you are. So we could do this. We could cd tut, and then I guess here, cd ... or alternatively cd app. And that'll work. That'll work totally fine. But in case you're curious, there is another way to do this, and why not explore a different way if it's not too complicated. So instead of change directory, we can do this cool thing called push directory. So push D just says, basically, it's like having the forward and back buttons on your web browser. You search for a new site, and that's like pressing push D. And then when you press the back button, that's like when you do pop D. So this is the analogy is actually a stack, which is a data structure in computer science, where you push things onto the stack and then you pop them off. So we're pushing tut onto the stack and we're popping it off and ending up back where we were. So if we rerun this, it should work. And by the way, if you can, this is why it's nice to just run the script as you're building it. Not always practical to do so, but if you can, it lets you discover these stupid mistakes that you make all over the place. And debug them as you add small bits to the script line by line, rather than writing some 50-line bash script and then being like, what the fuck happened? Why isn't Gunicorn starting? Why are my static files broken? Blah, blah, blah. So let's run it again. Well, Gunicorn wasn't running because it didn't start again. That's expected. Delete the old files, added the new files. that's the pushd, I think, just printing to the screen, copying the static files, and going back to where it was, starting Gunicorn again, and let's see if our static files work now. CANS 81, CANS 82, and our static files are back. Sweet. I kind of don't like this pushd now because it's printing to the screen, but oh well. Right. We went a bit off course there because we wanted to fix our static files, but let's keep going down through our deployment. We want to install our Python packages every time, and that's just to make sure we always have the latest packages in our virtual environment. So that's as simple as pip install requirements from requirements.txt. And if we want to use absolute paths, we always know it's in app requirements. We can just run that again. Cool, and it gives us a nice output of what got installed or what didn't get installed. And if you really felt like it, you could run pip freeze as well, but I'm not going to bother. Okay, running our Django migrations. So we want to run the migrations every time. If there are no migrations to run, it just won't do anything. If there are new migrations, it will run them. I think as you get into like more advanced deployment styles, this gets a bit more complicated. You have questions of backwards compatibility. Will this take, if you've got multiple servers running from the same database, you don't want your migrations to break the old server code with the new database schema. These are all things to think about later. We don't give a shit right now. We're just going to run our migrations because it's easy. Manage by migrate. No migrations to apply. All good. So we're pretty close. We're pretty close to being done. Our server still, by some miracle, is still running, and we've almost fully automated this part of the deployment. Now, there's one more thing to do, reading the supervisor config, and this is so that if we change this file and do a deployment, that it will reload these settings. Kind of optional, I think. You don't have to do this, but you could. These settings, I think, will automatically get reloaded when we restart Gunicorn, so I think that's okay. We don't need to do anything fancy for that. But to get these settings into supervisor every deployment, which I like as a goal, we need to add in a command for that. I don't remember how to do this, so I'm just going to Google it. Supervisor Python. And it's running supervisor. That's what we want. So we're going to be using supervisor CTL to send command messages to supervisor, which is running in a demonized mode. And you can see there are a lot of different ways to do things. Reload the daemons configuration files without add remove, no restarts. Yeah, sure. So we're just going to run supervisor reread. So that, I think, would look like this. I'm going to use that superscript, which is just a shortcut. Read. Okay, let's run that, see if it works. So we've only added one thing, and now we can test out our script. No config updates to process. That's nice. So to really test this, we'd want to change the config and change it back and see if it got uploaded, but I'm pretty happy with that right now. And our server is magically still going, and that's basically it. That is our whole code installation script. It's pretty cool. And now that we can upload our code and install our code, in the next video, we will test all of this out in one master deployment script, and we will test our deployment.